you could be forgiven for head scratching as to why the Metropolitan Police of London seem to be promoting imported from elsewhere Islam and undermining the imported from nowhere local population. Examples abound of this seeming illogic. This was the Islamic preacher calling for holy war on the streets of the UK, with the police doing nothing. This was the police taking down posters asking for help, finding the missing children of the enemies of Islam, i.e. the Jews, on this occasion. This is the Met Police helping a Palestinian protester after he comes down from his little climb, handing him back his flag, not only not confiscating it, but handing it back. Then we have the Met Police arresting an old man who's holding an England flag, the Met Police issuing a warning to blokes who are holding an England flag in opposition to a Palestinian demonstration, and here insisting that a Union Jack in similar circumstances be removed, all very perplexing on the face of it. The answer, of course, is that the Met Police is not what you assume them to be. Amina Ahmed is a Met Police leadership programme facilitator and project manager, and her heritage definitely does not hail from these shores. Her CV features inclusion, diversity and equality, none of which is anything to do with law and order, and everything to do with promoting modern-day left-wing ideology. And she is a deputy in the Race Action Plan. Of further note, she is involved with the Met's Race Action Plan. Also worth mentioning is the Race Action Plan, not to mention the Race Action Plan and the Race Action Plan in case you haven't been paying attention. The Race Action Plan gets fully 5 mentions. Her priorities are not policing. She's a Muslim, obviously, and she's very keen for you not to be nasty to them. At some point over the past 4 weeks or so, she had this to say. I think at this point, if anyone openly agrees with the war in Gaza, they should be called out as Islamophobic and inciting hatred against Muslims. That should be investigated as extremism. Whether the CT world decides to act fairly and proportionately and treat IDF support as an extremist ideology, I don't know. I will just chip in here to say that I disagree with the war in Gaza, but that disagreement is with the Islamic terrorists when they started doing what they do best, let's face it. But that's not what Ahmed is saying here. The war she is referencing is the response from the people who were attacked. We know that because she said treat Israel Defense Force support as an extremist ideology. And the Israel Defense Force were those who were doing the responding. In other words, if you support the Israelis, the Jews' response to being massacred by massacring back the terrorists who were doing the massacring, that makes you an extremist, which would appear to make me an extremist. Having clarified that, I'll just rewind here. I think at this point, if anyone openly agrees with the war in Gaza, they should be called out as Islamophobic and inciting hatred against Muslims. That should be investigated as extremism. Come and get me. Whether the CT world decides to act fairly and proportionately and treat IDF support as an extremist ideology, I don't know. It would be fair and proportionate to consider support for the Israel response, not support for the Islamic terrorist attack, but for the Israel response as extremist. This woman is high up in the Metropolitan Police. Now, does the Met Police arresting old men who are carrying Union Jacks while they give the terrorist supporters flags back when they drop them or whatever, does that appear to make more sense, knowing that these are the people in high-ranking positions at the Met Police? Probably it does. The people behind the scenes at these institutions are not what you assume. Not necessarily those on the front line, but those behind the scenes. Like with Nigel Farage and Coots describing him as a dishonest grifter. What? Sober-faced white men in their 50s and 60s using modern-day American slang. How does that happen? It happens because it's not sober-faced white men in their 50s and 60s. It's blue-haired, 20-something college graduates, fresh off their gender studies course. That explains that. The Met Police are not Dixon of Dock Green. This is the Met. That was then, this is now. That is why the Met arrests old men carrying Union Jacks and gives the terrorist supporters flags back to them.